Good.
Perfect.
Well, welcome to our Flex workshop, the CRC accreditation update, and we wanted to provide an opportunity to share with the entire college community an update on the institutional self-evaluation process that is underway. So Kim and I brainstormed this workshop, which is a dialogue on continuous quality improvement. And so Kim, did you want to go ahead? I have to keep track of who's got what.
Go to the next slide. So Emily and Julie Olson is our classified professional on the tri-chair team, and I'm serving as interim ALO for the accreditation effort, and Emily is our faculty chair. We've been working for quite some time now on the process and have accomplished several milestones so far that we're kind of excited about. The first one was to get all of you engaged in the process and to assign standard teams. So we did that, and the work began last semester with developing a timeline and training those team members. And then we had the individual teams review their ISER, so the Institutional Self-Evaluation Report Standards. That's what that acronym stands for. And accreditation really is a hallmark of quality for an institution. If an institution wants to be able to provide financial aid and wants their units to be able to transfer to other higher education institutions, then accreditation is a must. And we go through it willingly, and it's a peer review process that is very friendly now. So it's really great to have the support of the ACCJC to help us with this. So Emily over the summer had done a lot of work to develop these standards outlines that were populated by the standards teams. And we're going to share a little bit about that today and ask them some questions about what they have learned through the process of doing that. And then the outlines that have been developed to date were brought to PG committees for further discussion and input. So for example, resources committee agendized standard 3, and we had I call them the alpha standards rather than the substandards, because that doesn't sound very quality. The alpha standards tri-chairs would report out to the group on where they were, share their drafts, and get further input from the committees as an example. And then the PGC has also taken a look at what we've done so far. Just recently, not too long ago, right before the break, we had the good fortune of being able to hire our technical editor, who is a faculty member. Her name is Catherine De La Torre, and she is getting 20% reassigned time this spring to take all of those outlines that the standard tri-chairs have put together with their teams and start assembling that into one coherent institutional self-evaluation report. The additional things that we have left, you can see are unchecked there. The ISER draft is one, so that has to be assembled. And then development of the intro and eligibility narrative, which Emily's going to go through a little bit more. And then development of the QFE, which is the quality focus essay, which is a new item that we have to complete for accreditation now, which hasn't been part of the process before. So we've accomplished quite a bit. We're really on track with our timeline, thanks to all of the good work that our teams have done to date. And we look forward to staying on that timeline and working with Catherine and all of you to get these drafts vetted widely and firmed up for final review and then approval by our board. And go to the next slide for you.
Thank you, Kim. So the institutional self-evaluation report, which we refer to as the ISER, is going to be the first part of our accreditation review process. So after we turn that report in, it will go to a team of reviewers assembled by ACCJC, and they will evaluate our institution to see how well we meet the standards and see if there's any areas for improvement. One of the things that's expected of us on an ongoing basis is to meet and maintain the eligibility requirements to be able to be an accredited institution. And so the expectation is that we, on an ongoing basis, meet both the accreditation standards, and then there's 12, I believe, eligibility requirements included. The eligibility requirements a lot of times line up with individual standards. So when we go through and respond and document how well we meet those standards, we're often answering for those ERs at the same time. But there's a few things that we'll be responding to just up front at the outset of the ISER. The introduction of the ISER also gives us an opportunity to tell a little bit about the history of the college and our demographics and the student population that we serve, the community that we're in, and so forth. And so that it gives context to all that comes afterwards when we describe our college and the standards. For folks who are interested, we have our presentation that's here, but we also have a lot of resources available to you if you want to learn more about accreditation. On the college's homepage, and I didn't have this queued up, but on the college's homepage, there's a link to our accreditation resources on the bottom. And this gives you access to the most recent documentation produced by the college and also by the ACCJC. If you want to know more about our accrediting commission, you can click the link that takes you to accjc.org, and all of this is laid out in there as well. Before we finish up today, I'll also put a link in the chat of our Canvas course for accreditation, where we're going to be sharing out the draft of the ISER as it's produced, and it will be an opportunity or a location for you to share feedback and to comment on the document even directly. All right, so back to our presentation. Our eligibility requirements and introduction will be a component that will be part of our ISER, and then the meat of our ISER will be our accreditation standards. But Kim referred a little bit to our quality focus essay, so she's going to tell you about that in more detail.
Yeah, this is something new that they've come up for this new standards, guidelines, and requirements for the accreditation process. And so the quality focused essay is something that allows us to really highlight maybe a project or two or an initiative that we have that helps us examine our effectiveness of executing our mission in the context of student learning and achievement. And so we had asked for feedback on that on our Canvas site. We had taken the idea to PGC. The tri-chairs met with the college president to discuss various ideas. And so what has risen to the top is our We Won't Fall campaign, because it permeates every aspect of the institution and every employee that is involved in the institution, of course, our students as well. So the quality focus essay is something that we had to pick that has some action projects associated with it. And so some of the strategies might be instructional strategies, some of them might be student services strategies, for example. And then it has to have a timeline and responsible parties, and also have anticipated outcomes and measurable data that we can provide. So given that the college has already come up with a We Won't Fall campaign and the metrics that you see here on those 13 targets that we have, it seemed like a really natural fit, and it's something that's going to be ongoing for some time until we don't have any more obligation gaps for our students. And so that is what's going to go before PGC for a final confirmation of what the topic will be. It's going to be a focal point for our midterm report, so it's not something that could be just quickly done or just a really quick initiative. It needs to be something that's substantial and, like I said, permeates every aspect of the institution. It's multi-year and has a long-term direction to it. I don't know if you want to add any more to that, Emily, about QFE. It's a new piece.
Sorry, I muted myself while you were talking, and then I couldn't find my mute. So I think you covered it well. And this is something that is exciting for us because the standards, which I'm just going to give a brief introduction to next, is they're laid out for us. They're written by others. They're written by the accrediting commission. And so this is really an opportunity for CRC to talk about what matters to CRC and what we want to focus on and where our heart is in terms of improving our institution on behalf of students. And so this, I hope you will tune into as we share more information throughout the spring as well. So the standards we've referred to a couple of times, and ACCJC or accreditation, like almost any topic in community colleges, is rife with acronyms and terminology. And so just a little bit of vocabulary for you. The Accrediting Commission lays out for us our eligibility requirements to be eligible to be an institution, which provides degrees and certificates. And it has a set of standards. There's over 120 some odd standards altogether currently. And they cover different topics about what the expectations for an institution who has accreditation should maintain, or what would keep an institution healthy. And so these standards are broken down into 4 sections: standard 1, 2, 3, and 4. And on the slide, you'll see the topics within those standards. And then in each individual standard, there's standard sections. So standard 1A, standard 1B, and so forth. And then we have within each individual standard section, there's a line item of a standard. And so it's kind of layered. And we've invited today members from the different standard teams. So when Kim was telling about our ISER report that we're preparing, our teams that we compiled in fall, we solicited the participation of faculty, staff, and administrators from all across the college and assigned them to work on each of these standard sections. And so we've got members here from our standard teams, and they are going to talk to us a little bit about their experience of reviewing the standards and some of the things that we're learning about our college as we're taking these individual standards and examining our college.
Yeah,
so we have with us from Standard 1, Rhonda Farley and Tadeo Emeru, Standard 2, John Siemens, Standard 3, Sherry Fortin, and Standard 4, Chris Hubbard and Ryan Cox.
And we want to thank them for, these are part of the tri-chairs for each of those standards, and we really appreciate you coming in and sharing your experience with everybody today.
So we wanted this to be kind of a dialogue. And so if you are one of the panel discussion members, you're more than welcome to unmute. If you're listening in and we're not part of the panel, you're welcome to pose a question. We have a few questions of our own. And what I think we can do also is, if it's helpful, I can bring up documents if there's something that you want to refer to. But Kim, do you want to go ahead and start us off with our first question, and then any of the panel members who'd like to share on behalf of their standard can go ahead and chime in?
Sure. One of the first questions we have for you is briefly describe what topics are covered under your standard. So what might somebody learn by reading your standard? We can toss it out there to Standard 1 if you'd like to share. We have Rhonda and we have Tadeo today.
Rhonda, do you want me to get started, or you want to go ahead?
You want to go? Yeah, go ahead.
Sure. So I'll just go and highlight some of the key things that we responded to under Standard 1. So for us, Standard 1 includes mission, academic quality, institutional effectiveness, and institutional integrity. So under mission, some of the key things that we were asked to respond to include, does our mission, CRC's mission, support and describe the CRC's education purpose, student population, student achievement, and student learning. It also includes under mission how we use data to determine how CRC is accomplishing its mission. And then under academic quality and institutional effectiveness, some of the key things that we needed to respond to were the extent to which the college demonstrates substantive and collegial dialogue about student outcomes, student equity, academic quality, institutional effectiveness, and student learning and achievement. Another key thing that we were asked to respond to under academic quality and institutional effectiveness also included assessment of student learning outcomes for instructional programs and support services. And then under this category, we also had to address how CRC uses assessment data. So these are some of the key highlights under academic quality and institutional effectiveness. The third component for our standard was institutional integrity. And essentially that includes the accuracy and integrity of information that we provide to students and prospective students related to our mission statement, learning outcomes, educational programs, and support services. In addition to that, the other component within institutional integrity is to what extent do we accurately inform current and prospective students regarding the total cost of education, tuition and fees, and other required expenses, including textbooks. And then to what extent do we publish clear policies and procedures that promote honesty, responsibility, and academic integrity. So these are some of the key things that we had to address under Standard 1.
Thank you. Rhonda, did you want to add anything? Or?
So I think one of the things that I would add, I think one of the findings or areas of concern really came about not about how we were meeting the standard, but about how we were communicating that we met the standard. And I think one of the key highlights is that we need to do a better job of documenting. We know that dialogues are occurring in our meetings, but we don't always effectively capture what that dialogue is. So there's a lot of conversation around that. The other thing that I felt was that the work on this standard really sort of affirmed the work that is taking place now in institutional effectiveness. Some of the key areas of concern that were identified are things that we're already addressing in some of the changes that we're making with regard to moving to a staggered program review cycle, changing our program review structure. We're working now on changing the SLO reporting structure. So I think it really affirmed that what we are doing addresses the concerns that have been identified.
That's wonderful.
So I want to just kind of interject real quick and just make sure folks who have joined us, if you have questions, so if we're bringing up a topic or describing what the topic is or describing a concern that was raised, if you have ideas or suggestions or additional questions, we want to hear from you. So you may use the chat. I know sometimes we feel uncomfortable unmuting in large meetings, but you're more than welcome to do that as well. Thank you.
One other point that I wanted to add to what Rhonda was saying is that one of the areas that we're doing well is in terms of collecting data regarding student outcomes and opportunity gaps. So we have a lot of data points, a lot. I mean, I think that's really the benefit of having a really good research team. And we're fortunate at CRC compared to many other institutions, we have a phenomenal team. So that's an area where we're doing quite well in terms of having really good data. Now, the area that requires some improvement on our part at CRC is that we don't necessarily document or clearly communicate how well we're implementing changes as a result of that data. So if we identify specific gaps based on what the data is telling us, we really haven't seen a way or an intentional way of documenting the changes that we're making in conversations that we're having campus-wide throughout different committees or participatory governance committees. We haven't really been able to establish and document how well we're changing our practices based on the information that we're getting from the data points.
So that would be great planning item for us to work on when we look at the planning agenda for where we have areas that we want to improve. And it would be great to get suggestions on how we might go about making those changes to make that happen. Great. Does anybody else want to go for their standard and just tell us a little bit about what your standard was about? And it's a nice flow of dialogue between Tadeo and Rhonda, just kind of about what they went through most of our questions really in terms of, you know, where we're doing well and what did they learn and that type of thing. So feel free to branch out from just the topics if you'd like to share any of those things as well. We're happy to leave it open.
Well, since I'm by myself, I guess I'd expect some more questions from you to help me branch out. But anyway, the question that you asked about topics covered under the standard. In standard 2, it's all about student learning programs and support services. And there's 3 different areas within that larger topic. The first one is just instructional programs, which deals with curriculum and curriculum processes and all the career opportunities, degrees offered, awards, certificates, other things that are on campus. And it also involves you know, the evaluation of those programs and evaluation of instruction that takes place. And so that's that first part. The second part of the standard is library and learning support services, which includes, of course, the library, also distance education, the various labs that are on campus, such as computer labs and the math, reading, writing centers, the different tutoring labs that are offered on campus. And then the third area is all about student support services, you know, which involves processes like, you know, enrollment and onboarding of students, counseling, providing other sources to help them stay on campus, you know, for like, you know, when we talk about things that are going well, a great thing on campus that supports students right now is the Hot Cares program, and also changes that have occurred in the last year or so regarding the health and wellness services that are provided for students also. But that's standard 2, learning programs and support services.
And John, I'll note that you have some team members with you. And so Alex, Rochelle, and Yolanda all participated in different parts of standard 2. So feel free to share your thoughts on folks if you want to add to the conversation. So what are some things that you think we're doing well in standard 2?
Okay. When I was in meeting with these people and looking at what's been shared so far, I guess I tried to come up with a couple real broad ideas. And so one, I'll say, one thing that's going well in this standard, I would say, is removing of barriers that are affecting student achievement. And that involves all those different areas. And so that's definitely, you know, a strength that, you know, that instruction's improving, but these barrier, you know, students are, for example, the process of, you know, just applying for the school and actually getting to enrollment, you know, there were many barriers along the way. And that's an example of something that's changed here on the campus in the last couple of years. The steps to actually getting enrolled in the school have changed a lot. And so those things are improving. But the interesting thing is too, you know, of course, as you are improving in certain areas and some of these barriers are coming down, new barriers are being discovered all the time. You know, for another example of that, areas that are going well, I think without a doubt, you know, the review of programs is going well. You know, distance education has always been a good thing on campus, but with COVID happening, the areas of improvement have definitely exposed themselves also that are needed in online instruction and with distance education. You know, for example, I know that I want to say on the initial rollout of Chromebooks that were provided for students, there was a couple hundred. And then there was another 300 the district, was able to help provide, but there's still a great need for more. And so that was, again, we're doing some things well, but as other things like COVID have come up, it's revealed how we are limited. So there are some areas of improvement, that are definitely needed. Some other things that are going well are, of course, new programs that are happening over the last few years. There's been an awful lot of grants that have come for the school to provide additional resources, for student services and for opportunities for students. However, a grant, is a temporary thing. And so that creates, an area of concern also for the standard, is how we can create continuous funding to keep these services available. So those are a few things that are going well as a few things that, we obviously, want to take a look at. So.
Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. It's always a good point to make sure that we can institutionalize our grant funded activities. It looks like Cherie would like to respond. Did you want to say something, Cherie?
No, just excellent job. Standard 2, John. Lots of great evaluative information.
Great. All right.
Does anyone else from Standard 2 want to add anything? I saw Yolanda responded in the chat with that captured. Thank you. Well, Cherie, would you like to tell us about Standard 3?
Sure, yeah. And I'll just say I am one of the 3 tri-chairs on this team, which includes Teresa Tenna, our VPA, and Katie DeLeon of Business Services. And Standard 3 has 4 areas in which it explores under the main topic of resources. And so Standard 3 is looking at how the institution and whether the institution effectively uses its human resources, its physical resources, its technological resources, and financial resources to achieve its mission and improve academic quality and institutional effectiveness. So what did you call it? Alpha Standard A, Kim? Not substandard, but Alpha Standard A is human resources. And that group, the team members who worked on human resources were Bonnie and Nathan Miller, Tina Nguyen, and then Emily, you sat in on that group. So maybe if you feel like you want to jump in when I talk about gap analysis, that would be awesome. So under human resources, there's quite a number of subtopics that the team looked at, including, how the institution ensures quality of administrators, faculty, and staff, whether they're qualified through their education, training, and experience to do the work. And so the standard looked at the min quals for faculty, job descriptions, and also coordinated with the district office for documents on eligibility and effectiveness in the job postings and hiring manuals. And what we found was there was a lot of evidence of meeting the standard, which is good. The recruitments, documents, and the min qual documents from, I think, the CCCO, the Chancellor's Office, min qualifications, office publications. In addition, Standard 3A, Human Resources, takes a look at, I think, the processes by which folks are hired and evaluated. And again, the analysis and evaluation of those sections showed that we do a good job of holding folks accountable, that we're doing a good job with our evaluation processes and also our hiring processes. And I think one of the areas for improvement in area A of resources was the administrative and classified hiring process. And while we have evidence, I think that there is a process, it maybe is not so clear. And Emily, I'm going to defer to you a little bit to talk about that gap analysis. Can you?
So I think one of the things that there just wasn't a lot of documentation on. So hiring, of course, in human resources relates heavily to our district office since we're employees of the district. There's a lot of documentation on procedure for in terms of how to run a hiring panel and how to screen applicants and so forth. But we do have resource allocation processes on the campus. And for the college, we have a fairly clear process for requesting new faculty and prioritizing those faculty requests and then funding them, of course, based on the resources that are given to our college. And there is some documentation on that for our classified professionals, but it is a little bit limited, and especially when you start getting into temporary and so forth. And so I think one of the questions that our team has was more information about kind of the requesting and prioritization process for those types of positions. And so if folks also, if they have suggestions of documentation that exists that maybe just isn't in a public website or public location, that can be helpful too.
Yeah, awesome. Then the other, I think, final area is the sort of professional code of ethics for all of the constituencies across our college. And the standard 3A team found that there was quite a bit of documentation, written codes of professional ethics for personnel, including our board policies and our LRCFT contract and our human resources policies, as well as our administrator policies in the LRSA contract, as well as board policies for those groups. But one thing that the team noted was that there isn't a single code of ethics at our college level for all employees, which you know, the college might want to consider adopting in the future. And they noted that Sac City had a sort of overarching code of conduct for all employees at Sac City. Yeah.
Oh, and at CRC, we have our honor code, which we've had for many years. Right now, it's kind of framed, at least on our publications, in terms of a student honor code. And so even potentially reframing that to be broadly a CRC community honor code and using it in that manner might be something that we would want to discuss.
Yeah. So standard 3A is really great. Just looking if anybody wants sort of a more detailed analysis of all of the processes affecting human resources across our college. There's just terrific information in there, including, you know, as I said, evaluation, code of conduct, hiring practices, evaluation practices, and professional development for again, human resources. Standard 3B is all about physical resources, and there's several subcategories under the physical resources. There's quite a bit of overlap between what happens at the college and the district office plan. And so I think the standard is still sort of working on that, but basically, in physical resources, it is examining the safety, security, and learning and working environments in terms of physical spaces. So we commented about the rekeying project, commented about new construction, commented about healthful environments, including, you know, ventilation systems, as well as safety protocols, ADA, addressing ADA concerns across our college and campus. And then physical resources also looks at the sort of plan for building and maintaining and remodeling and updating, replacing its physical resources like buildings and facilities, equipment, and all that. There's quite a bit of data there. One thing that I think the team noted in Standard B is that sometimes the program review process and the long-term facilities master plan aren't communicating with each other. And so that could be an area for further analysis and evaluation, is how those two documents are and needs are interfacing, and ways to maybe address the disconnect between, again, the program review notations about facilities and physical resources needs, and how that gets that improved through the facilities master plan, both locally and at the district. The third element of Standard 3 is the technological resources. And the technological resources, of course, are facilities, hardware, software, needs that are appropriate to support the institution's management and learning, as well as operational and learning functions. And I think the team did a really great job of analyzing the IT master plan and the coordination with district. There's quite a bit of overlap in that standard as well between what we do here at CRC, as well as what the district is in charge with. But it looks like the IT master plan is going to be, or is in the process of being updated. So that is positive. And they also discovered that there's quite a few sort of plans that have been updated, but haven't been communicated or aren't easily accessible on the website. So I think that's an area that maybe folks are going to work on as well. Mm-hmm. And then the final is Standard D, the substandard D, which is about financial resources. And the financial resources, of course, are all the different ways in which we support and sustain learning environments and service areas, and institutional effectiveness with our money, I guess, our financial resources. There's quite a bit of documentation, including, of course, the budgets that are released by the district's bucket model. All of that stuff is very clearly articulated in the evidence in Standard 3D. And if you are, wondering, how does the district allocate its financial resources, this is a really excellent document to go through and read. I think what was interesting in the analysis and evaluation is that our CRC resource allocation guide actually does a pretty good job of connecting all the different sort of procedural ways in which financial resources are allocated on campus, as well as its connection back to the district budgets and resource allocation models. And I think, Kim, you sat on that. So feel free to clarify if you want, but I don't think we found any gaps in Standard 3D, which was really great.
No, we didn't. We started getting a little sidetracked on the issue that you already mentioned into physical spaces and the disconnect with the facility master plan and program review, but that really belonged in the B part of Standard 3. So other than that, yeah, the district has had outstanding audits for years and years with no findings, and the processes are well integrated with program review. So though that's really nice to see that the grassroots needs of faculty are rising to the top and being able to be prioritized and resourced according to what funding they're eligible for. So yeah, it was a really positive experience. We are pretty proud of the fact that CRC is doing very well in that area.
Yeah. So overall, I think Standard 3 for resources is very comprehensive. I think, you know, it's a complicated topic because it really does reach many, many areas. And there's a lot of collaboration, of course, in resources between what we do at CRC and you know, the district's interests and plans. And again, I would highly recommend anybody who, you know, isn't super familiar with the resource allocation process locally and districts to take a look at this document. It's edifying.
Thank you, Cherie. You had a really bulky one, that one in standard 2. So that was a lot of work. We appreciate the thorough overview of what you found. I want to make sure we get to standard 4. Ryan and Chris were on that standard. We appreciate you being here today. And if you wouldn't mind sharing just a little bit about what your standard covers, and then maybe if you did find any gaps that we need to address.
Ryan, you want to start or do you want me to start?
It doesn't matter. Go ahead if you feel for it.
Sure, why not? I'll jump right in. Just a little bit of an overview on standard 4, which is leadership and governance. The focus really for this group was on the contributions of leadership throughout the organization. And it's really focused on promoting student success, sustaining our academic quality, integrity, and fiscal stability. All of these things, looking at them, they're done through our established governance structures, processes, and practices. So we split these off into 2 different standards. My group that I was part of worked on standard 4A. We took a look at 7 different areas, and I'll kind of briefly just go through those areas of what we split up between the group. There's 4 of us working on this, Colin Prigliasso, Teresa Aldridge, and then Trevor Stevenson. One of the first ones that we looked at was what the systematic participative processes are used out there in effective planning and implementation leading to institutional excellence. So we had quite a bit of discussion on that. Second up was our established policies and procedures, in which our individuals can bring forward ideas to work together on appropriate policies, planning, and special purpose committees. And this was really where it was focused on faculty and staff participation. So we took a look at that. Third was we took a look at how clearly are defined roles in institutional governance for administrators and faculty are really written out there. And we're doing actually pretty well. Let's see here. Identify how we make recommendations about our curriculum and student learning programs and services. So there we focused in on policies and procedures and the roles of each group that are currently outlined, and we look for gaps or missing components there. Took a look at institutional governance. A lot of this section is really based on institutional governance, whether it be participative or through other avenues. The 6th section there was the processes for decision making and making sure that they're appropriately documented and widely communicated. And I think there's some overlap with this particular section in some of the other standards, that listening to some of the information from the other teams, we were all on board with some of the gaps that are there. And there are, I always like to finish on a strong point. There are some very strong components that we do have on documentation. And then evaluation procedures to ensure that our integrity and effectiveness in decision making is being carried out along with some of those focuses. Some of the things that we found that we're doing well. We're committed as an institution to an open process that includes representatives from all major stakeholder groups. there are gaps that we have identified in some of those areas. But what's unique about that is as we identify those gaps, I think really we're correcting them as we go through and we identify them. So it's not that we identified things that aren't being done. Things are being identified and being changed as we go through different processes. The LR, CCD, and CRC working together, we ensure that there's a participatory governance that is used in decision-making processes. So having that in the forefront is something that we're doing very well. And then lastly, something that we identified from the group that we're all doing well is that we do have legislative principles and statements out there that help us with our effective pathways that will optimize our student access and student success. So that is supported throughout. So we're at least following and we have those processes in place. That's kind of in a nutshell what Standard 4A was.
Sure. I can talk a little bit to Standard 4B, Chris, if you want me to do that. And then there's actually 4 substandards within 4. The 3rd and 4th items are the governing board and the multi-college district. And for those 2 items, it was determined that the district office is primary in providing the initial information regarding those 2. So our C&D items were waiting, and I think we're going to get that information in late January. And so Group 4 C&D committees are going to begin their work in late January, unless that's changed. Emily, is that still on target? Yeah, still on target. So 2 of our 4 groups were kind of on standby, and they'll begin their work at the end of this month and next month once they get the information from district office. So item 4B was our chief executive officer, really just making sure that the CEO provides the level of institutional leadership through communication, policy, procedures. And so that subcommittee and their roles, that subcommittee worked on that. Couple of items in particular that they have to review are that the CEO assumes primary responsibility for the quality of the instruction and institution. The CEO oversees the roles of the administrative structure of our college. CEO guides institutional improvement of teaching and learning through appropriate policies and procedures, ensures leadership of what we're doing right now, which is accreditation. CEO ensures institutional control and effectiveness of our budget and allocation processes. And then CEO has to ensure effective communication with all constituencies that the college serves, I think both internally and externally. So that was 4B's charge overall. And I know their subcommittee was several people, and Christy West, I don't know if she's with us right now, but since she works so closely with Ed, she had a lot to do with this committee and their write-up. So many thanks to Christy West and all her great work on this, as she's closest to the CEO. And in re-reviewing their items, they thought that we did a pretty effective job overall. I didn't see any real serious recommendations. So they felt that on the 4B CEO that we were meeting the standards. And then 4C and D are TBD.
Well, I want to give an opportunity if folks who've been listening have questions or have thought of something that they'd like to hear more about. And maybe we can.
There is just one thing that I'd like to add into one of the gap points for standard 4 that I didn't mention before. The group felt that it was important that going forward, due to the changing times with civil unrest and all of the other issues out there, that we take a fresh look at some of our current policies and procedures that make up how we operate through the leadership component, making sure that we're looking at a fresh equity lens due to the changes and different pressures that we're experiencing today because of what's going on in the world, just to make sure that we're still in alignment. So that was just one of the areas.
Thank you, Chris. So I think that that last kind of recommendation goes along with something that I appreciate about our institution, and I hope we can reflect in our quality focus essay if we do choose to look at the We Won't Fall campaign. Chris noted that when you were looking at some of the findings or things that we needed to improve on, they were things that we were addressing. And this is something that I appreciate about CRC, is that I think our participatory governance and our institutional processes are pretty healthy, because I think we are kind of self-aware of where we need to improve and continually working on those things. And I think accreditation is like shining a light on one part of where we're continuing to kind of progress as an institution. One of them is the topic of equity in our decision making and examining our processes very critically to make sure that we are not we are removing institutional barriers for students, but then we're also not perpetuating those through the way that we operate. And so it goes, I think, all the way from decision making and leadership all the way to the way we allocate resources and so forth. All right, questions? And if there aren't questions, I'm going to ask you guys a question.
I was wondering too, I heard a little bit of it, and Chris sort of alluded to it, that he found a common thread among the 4 standards of some areas where we might do some improvement. Did any of you, after listening to each other's presentation about what you discussed, find an area where you might want to do some collaboration in terms of you know, what we might look at as a planning item, how you could work together to solve that issue that we highlighted? Like, I'm thinking about maybe there's some program review and resources group, and I already know that we're working on that they, from their wonderful presentation yesterday, they're planning to work with the tri-chairs of resources and also come to the resources committee about, you know, firming up maybe some new way of doing the resource allocation requesting process. So I don't know if anybody heard anything like that from each other or has any comment in that regard.
I'll just echo the resources committee as well as the institutional effectiveness committee have been, you know, doing some cross collaborations and expect to continue those cross collaborations, including work on the planning guide, which I don't know if they talked about yesterday because I wasn't able to attend, but you know, identifying where in our planning processes there's those intersectionalities between planning and program review and institutional planning and resource allocation and you know, other parts of our process, of course, too. But from my perspective, I think all that stuff is really good, and I expect that to continue.
That's great.
Yeah, this is Rhonda, and I just wanted to echo what Cherie said and identify, you know, from standard, from her standard 3, where they pointed out the disconnect between program review, planning, and facilities. And that's another area where we've identified that we identify facility needs in program review. They're funneled into the unit plan, but then they just sort of stagnate there and they don't move forward into a prioritization process. So we're talking about now, how do we improve the connection between program review, unit plan, and the other plans that then occur on campus?
That's awesome. Great.
Yeah, I saw similar things were shared, especially from standard 2A, the instructional programs. And I guess it would be taking the program review back even to a more focused thing, the connection between curricular review, moving to programs themselves and on up. So I guess I would say I'm hearing, across the board, the whole chain of review from beginning to end, the needs for continued what's the word, transparency, I guess, or making sure that there's direct connections between, curriculum and courses to the program and to the resources that are provided.
That is a good point.
And maybe even going further back, assessment to curriculum to program review to resources.
Mhm.
Yeah, and this is Rhonda. I would add that, this is where we're going to see some of the impacts of our move to the staggered program review cycle, with the idea that as we roll out a 6-year cycle, that going forward, programs will complete their course assessments, their PSLO assessments, look at curricular impacts and curriculum updates before their next program review. So I think we are moving on some of these items before they were even apparent necessarily through this process.
And thanks for sharing that, Rhonda. That's a good example of what Emily described a few minutes ago about how we're making, we're addressing areas of improvement already and recognize where we need to go. One other thing that seemed to come up in multiple standards that I picked up on too, was to the need, I don't know what to call it, better record keeping or better data collection. I know we, yeah, I heard that in multiple standards as people were sharing. So that might be something we emphasize also.
Mhm.
So I'm going to ask that question. So thanks, John. I think you're right. There's two things that I heard a lot of when I was talking to standards. One was communication. So we do this work and how do we share it? How do we communicate it out across the college? And then documentation. So we have these conversations. Maybe we got our Hawk Dash data on how our program is serving students, and we talked about and we made some changes within our department, but that may be captured kind of informally, or maybe not captured to be able to share again and kind of show how that data impacted a change, and then also follow up on it and see, was that change successful? And so I think it's a balance of having organic ways of communicating and documenting, but then also making sure that it's transparent and available and something that we can refer back to and learn from, and also show, our progress. So I think ideas on how to do that better are something I'd be interested in hearing.
I think
Sounds
just
like
keeping
a set of
open
ideas.
lines of communication is important, because with open lines of communication, that's when ideas start flying. And quite often we get stuck in ruts where we're preoccupied with what's going on our desk. We're task oriented, and some of those things fall off the table. So how we achieve that, I don't have the answer, but identifying that those open lines of communication and taking moments out to really focus in on what priorities need to be prioritized is important.
Yeah, one thing that's difficult for me, I think, is that the information is out there, but it's in so many different places. I mean, we've got our Google Drive, we've got board docs now, we've got all these things in the archives that we can't get to anymore and have to move. And I don't know the solution for it, but it would be nice if there was an even better collective or repository where we're going to put all this information, because we do need to improve communication without a doubt and share that information. But sometimes I feel overloaded when I attend different flex meetings and other things, and here's a link to this, here's a link to this, and they're all different places, and if you don't have the link, being able to find it is almost impossible sometimes. So anyway, sorry for venting a little bit there, but I'll try and come up with solutions.
No, this is an honest assessment of where we are. And I think a lot of people would agree with that assessment that you just made. Yeah.
Definitely.
Emily, I don't know if we want to take 5 minutes or so to talk about next steps in the process, or.
Sure. So we, as Kim mentioned at the beginning, when we were kind of laying out what we were doing, the next steps are really to bring together all of the outlines and the evidence and the good information that's been gathered by our standard teams, and to make that into a narrative format. Anybody who's been at the college for a few years or seen accreditation before, it's creating a big document of all of our responses to the standards. ACCJC has created a template, and so we're trying to make it very concise and fit within the kind of format that they've laid out for us. Our draft we plan to have available towards the end of this semester, because we want members of our college to be able to read through sections and ask questions and provide suggestions, and also help us, create and firm up the response to make sure that it's accurate and reflective of our college. We will have our final version of the document presented to the college next fall, which we typically vet through our participatory governance structure, and then it will be presented to the district for approval by our board of trustees. And so we kind of have a broad timeline where we'll be completing the rest of the ISER over this upcoming calendar year. We, after that, after it's approved by the board, we'll be turning our report into the ACCJC, our accrediting commission, and they will have a review team compiled to read through our report. The process for review is a little bit different than it was when we last went through it. What happens now is a review team will get our ISER early, about 6 months before before we would typically have somebody on campus. They'll read through our ISER, note any questions that they have, and send back to us their core inquiries or their main questions that they have for the college. That will give us a little bit of time to prepare some more information for them if we need to provide better detail about a topic. And then when we do have a visiting team, our review team come to campus, assuming we are on campus, they will be coming to gather the information on those core inquiries, rather than trying to assess everything about our institution all at once. Institutions that are in remote operations are still proceeding through the review process. So if for some reason we were not fully on campus or in some sort of hybrid online on campus modality, we would still proceed through our review process as normal. So that's kind of the broad strokes. And then after that visiting team comes to campus, then they'll prepare and finalize their review team report, which is then turned into the commission for an action on our institution, which is to reaffirm accreditation, or if they have additional follow-up that they want us to complete, they will ask that of us. And then we'll be done for another 7 years until the next report.
Any last questions before we say goodbye to everybody? And before we do that, I do want to thank everybody who showed up today to summarize the work that they have done. It was no easy feat, especially since we were in remote operations in the fall with all of the prep that faculty had to do. I just can't thank you enough for participating today. So thank you for that. And if there's any last questions, we'd be happy to answer those.
Hear, hear. Thank you very much.
I think we're separating them between lunchtime and us right now. So could be people are ready for a break.
I bet. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording, and we'll stay online. I think I can stop the recording, and we'll stay online for any questions if folks have it.
All right, great.
Thank you.
Well, thank you all so much.